Hello, Mason. I'm Richard Wiles, and I live in Petoskey, Michigan, and I was an American history teacher for a lot of years in Petoskey. And I now write local history articles about events of the area. And one of them was the crash of a B52 into the bay back in 1971, and it cost Air Force men, 9 of them, their lives. I'm here to be interviewed by Mason.
Have you ever been to the site of Big Rock?
I have been to the site of Big Rock, and you would not know that there's anything there today. If you walk the shoreline, you would never know that a nuclear plant existed at that site. It's been totally cleaned up. However, there are about 12 cement large casks full of nuclear waste that are sitting there on that property today, guarded by armed guards. You can't get close to that. You can walk the shoreline, but you can't come up very far from the shoreline before the armed guards stop you, because they're protecting that nuclear waste in those large cement casks where they have no place to take it, to get rid of it. So it's just sitting there, and it's still sitting there. And I do have pictures of that for you to see in this video.
Big Rock Point was a nuclear power plant in Charlevoix, Michigan that was made in the year 1962. It was owned by Consumers Energy and could produce 67 megawatts of electricity. The B52 crash happened in the year 1971. All 9 men on board lost their lives. Their bodies were never found.
Why did you decide to write a book about the crash?
Well, what happened, because for years people thought it was pilot error. People thought that the pilot caused the plane to go down. And I started digging in and researching and getting documents from the Air Force and talking to various people that were in the Air Force at the time. And I found out that it wasn't pilot error, and that it was the plane actually committed suicide. It was so old. They were using an old training plane, an old B52 training plane, because all the good planes were 2 places, either in Vietnam in the war or on bases here, what were called strategic air command bases loaded with nuclear weapons to protect the United States. They made the people training use old planes. And this plane decided on that night that it was just too old to fly anymore, and it lost its left wing. Its left wing fell off. And when that happened, you had this fiery crash into our bay. There was no survivors. There was no way to survive. As soon as that plane lost its wing, left wing, it went right down into the water, and the jet fuel on board caused it to explode. There was very little remains of what that plane looked like. It went down to the bottom of, there were no remains ever found of those 9 men. They were all blown up in the explosion. So I sort of wanted to find out what happened. That's why I did it.
Why did they close the Big Rock plant?
But the Big Rock plant, I think, continued until the 1990s. And then they decided it was no longer usable. They opened it in '63. I think they closed it 30 years later. It had used up all the nuclear uranium and whatnot. And there was really no place left to store, because every now and then they had to take the uranium out and put it and put new ones in. So they decided to close the plant, and then they dismantled it.
Do you know what happened to the remains of the B52?
I do. The B52, when it exploded, hitting the water, and the jet fuel exploded it disintegrated into a lot of pieces and fell to the bottom. So the next May, when the bay was free of ice, they brought in a big salvage boat, and they went down and they hauled up all the big pieces of the plane they could find. And it all went to Charlevoix, to the Coast Guard station, and they set it on the dock in Charlevoix, the Coast Guard station. And then they decided they hauled it by trailer truck, a couple of trailer trucks. They put it all on that, and they hauled it up across the Straits of Mackinac to an Air Force base called Kinross. And in one of the hangars there, they laid out all the pieces that they could to make the plane look like it was still intact. There was a lot missing, but they laid it all out. And by laying all those pieces out, some of the engineers from Boeing Aircraft came here because they were the ones that built the plane. They looked at all of that material on that floor of the warehouse, and they said the left wing dropped off. It was structural failure. The power plant had a dome, a big dome over the top of it. And they removed that dome. It was about 1.25 inches thick. And this is a piece of that dome. They cut up souvenirs of the dome, the steel dome. And a lot of people in Charlevoix were given pieces of the dome. That's all that was left of the power plant, except for those casts of nuclear waste that's still there at the site of the old plant.
Thank you for spending this time with us and allowing us to interview you today, and we hope you have a great day.
Well, it's been my pleasure to meet you very much. Thank you.